you get that cozy, creepy feeling of fall when you look outside your window and there's palm trees and it's clearly summer? Well, that is going to be the research question of this vlog. And my hypothesis is that by eating a lot and reading a lot and drinking tea with the aircon full blast, so that by the end of this month we have an aircon bill for my husband to get scowly about, I can then at least simulate the experience of a nice fall day. So welcome to the vlog. My name is Stephanie, and in this vlog I'm going to be reading two of my most anticipated new releases pretty much of the year. I've been waiting all year for them. That's Steady and Drowning by Ava Reid and Rouge by Mona Awad. I really wanted the actual hard copy of Rouge, but I went and I looked in like every bookstore in Singapore, and it seems that they have underestimated my enthusiasm to read this book. So they didn't have it in stock, hence Kindle version. So we're going to start off with that. And then I'm not really one for house decorating, but I am one for baking. So I think we're going to do a little bit of baking and sitting around drinking tea. Hopefully just a really chill, cozy day, week to follow. Okay, so I thought I would just check in. I'm at chapter 5. And I'm really having a hard time stopping reading this book. It's so good. Right from the first few sentences, the prologue, it has prologue. Right from the prologue, I just was immediately getting chills. There's something so witchy and enchanting about how she's written this book, in terms of the prose, but also the setting. It begins in the prologue kind of giving you a picture snapshot of what the mother and daughter's relationship is like by showing a scene of the mother telling her daughter a story about a very, very beautiful princess, and the daughter wanting to hear it. And from this sort of interaction, we immediately find out that the daughter is mixed race. She doesn't have a father in the picture. The mother has something kind of distant or almost mystical about her, and the positioning within the story, she's sitting at a mirror and gazing into the mirror telling the story. It's really Snow White-esque, so I'm definitely getting that comparison. And then immediately we go into chapter 1. Her mom has died. She's at the funeral. She's just gotten home. We're getting to know the characters, and she pretty much finds out that her mom has a lot of debt, and she sold her dress shop, and right before she passed away, they were having some strange interactions where she was saying stuff on the phone that getting her words confused, and she was wondering if her mom might be developing early onset dementia or something like that. So we still don't completely know what's going on, but our main character, her name is Belle, and she is obsessed with skincare products and beauty regimes and watching skincare videos just obsessively. And her mother was also totally obsessed with beauty as well. I definitely feel the inner world of this character reminds me a little bit of the main character from All's Well. Just the style of her monologuing, and she seems the kind of character that I can see becoming extremely unhinged later on in the book. So I'm really reading with bated breath, waiting for it to begin, the chaos to begin, because you can feel it coming. So far, reading this book feels like walking through a gothic Sephora. I don't know any other way to describe it. All of the skincare stuff, the way she describes her mother smelling like violets and smoke, and there's something very luxe and luxurious about it. Also the idea of Frenchness and beauty, and the association between beauty and being French, and because the main character's mother was French, and she's been living in Montreal, and there's this real air that I'm totally enjoying. I think that's the first 10% or so of the book, and I guess I'll check in about how I'm feeling about it again soon. But until then, so I've been seeing these pumpkin breads on Pinterest, and bread with pumpkin in it, but also that looks like a pumpkin. So it has string tied around it. I got a recipe that is full of nuts and seeds and pumpkin puree, and we'll see. Hopefully that works. I'm gonna mix the dough now, and then I think that I can bake it tomorrow morning. I didn't have any of the cotton string that I was planning to use, so I used this jute, and I knew that could have been a bad idea, but I didn't really account for how it looks kind of hairy now that I've taken it off. I don't know. I mean, it smells okay. It didn't get very much rise. I think it's gonna be edible. It's actually not too bad. I put some cream cheese on it and a bit of dark honey, because it's not sweet, and yeah, it's all right. Got my goth starfish mug, some Earl Grey tea, and some cozy socks. So Mr. Kitty and I have been binge watching Gilmore Girls, but his patience is pretty short for this show. We have also been binge watching Good Omens, which he loves and has taken to biting me until I turn it on once he gets sick of Gilmore Girls, so we'll see if we can finish this episode. Okay, so I'm about 50% through, or just approaching the 50% mark. There's a cat named Angelica. I did not realize that Angelica was a good cat name until now, but I don't know why it's never occurred to me. And I am very intrigued. I'm still really enjoying it. The plot is going pretty consistently, pretty fast actually, along, and it's definitely getting spookier, super witchy, and yeah, very intriguing. So far I've pretty much hit like the cap of the premise. Like, she was staying in a hotel because she didn't really want to go into her mother's house. Eventually she did go into her mother's house. We've met a few new characters who are all a little sus, and we learn a little bit more about how her mother died, because there's no foul play suspected, but she was like found kind of broken at the bottom of like a cliff by the sea. But there's like some very strange things going on in the house. Like, all of the mirrors have like a crack through them. I have this like sense that we have like hit the peak of the roller coaster, and it's gonna be just like straight downhill from now, in terms of like how the characters are doing, because you can really tell that this narrator is becoming increasingly like a little bit unreliable. I don't know if I really like her very much. She's kind of, I mean, she's a character and she isn't doing anything that is like expressly unlikable, but she's really, really fixated on this skincare stuff and this idea of aging and anti-aging, and it's like the only thing that's really going on in her mind. And you can tell she has a very complicated relationship with her mother, and it seems like she's missing memories from her childhood as well, which is kind of weird, but I'm not really sure what's going on there yet. But anyway, I think that's going to be it in terms of plot updates that you're going to get from me, because I do want to keep this pretty spoiler free. But yeah, it's getting spooky. It's getting really good. Okay, apologies for the probably bad lighting, but I have like 3 chapters left, and this book is fully unhinged. Like, I don't think I could even explain it to you in a way that would make sense if I tried. It is wild. There was a point where I almost felt like it was getting repetitive at like the 40 to 60% mark. And then it was like at the 60% mark, I just had this moment of like, how did I get here? How did we get here? Is the character on drugs? Was there a time that the character took any drugs? Am I on drugs? Like, you know, in the way that Mona Awad's books are, it is such a ride. I'm having such a good time, and it is not going the direction that I was expecting it to go at all either, which is like the whole other thing, is that you know that it is going to be a Snow White retelling, and so you kind of expect like a certain way for it to go, and it's not going that way. It isn't really retelling either. It's like inspired by, I would say. But yeah, it's unhinged. Unhinged is all I have to say. But I'm gonna go for a quick swim, and then I think I'm gonna come straight back and just finish the book, and we'll probably check in with my final thoughts later. Okay, so I finished Rouge, and wow, it did not disappoint. I have a lot of thoughts about this book, and I took like a day or so to kind of digest, because this book was really strange. It was really bizarre in the same kind of way as Bunny, with an unexpected Tom Cruise cameo. The ending, I think, makes sense, and there is more explanation about what actually happened in the ending of this book compared to any of the other books that I've read by her. I think that this is also my favorite book by Mona Awad. Actually, that's very difficult to say, because I just felt like the themes that the book dealt with and the way that she employed Snow White was really interesting, really well done. It explores a lot of things like exoticization, Asian? There's a word I'm trying to pronounce and I can't do it. but by one of her parents, and it's not as focused on the idea of whiteness and race as something like natural beauty was, but it focuses a lot more on inherited ideas about beauty. And I didn't know that until I was reading a little bit more about Snow White, and that the actual original Snow White, or a very early version of Snow White, was not a stepmother, but actually a real mother-daughter relationship. And so she was drawing a lot on that and like exploring the relationship between beauty and beauty as you age, and like how it affects our main girl's perception of herself, how even like her mother's perception was shaped a little bit by their grandmother. There were moments that I really wasn't sure about how the inspiration from Snow White was going to take shape, because as I said in one of my check-ins, it did not go the way that I was expecting it to at all. I think that our main character has a lot more agency than Snow White in the traditional tale, but still in some ways a little bit less agency than her other main characters in her other books. And I think some of that was because of the grief factor that she was exploring here as well. But what I found very interesting about her execution of this is that the mirror object, or the mirror character, the thing that is the mirror in this book, is a lot more active about pitting the mother and daughter against each other, and just kind of exploring the complexity of both the loving and admiring a parent, and also being envious of them, or thinking about how you live up to some of their expectations and their ideals, and how you inherit and how that's passed down to you. I was really curious because I feel like there's been a lot more, especially in the horror type genre, that is exploring the beauty industry and beauty ideals and beauty norms. And this was just, it felt very different. It was more, I think the description of horror tinted is a really good one. Natural beauty is like horror, body horror. It's a lot more graphic and grotesque, in some ways on the nose, about addressing the beauty industry. But yeah, I really felt like Mona Awad's exploration was a little bit less of a societal critique rather than an exploration of relationships within a society. So yeah, I totally enjoyed it. It did not disappoint at all, and I'm so glad, because I find often I get very, very hyped and very excited about these books, and the book just can't live up to it. But there's something about her writing style that just draws me in. I love it so much. Especially this book was like super witchy, and I just ate it up. It was so good. So yeah, I had so much fun reading this. I'm so sad that I couldn't get a hard copy from the bookstore. I went there but I think that I'm still gonna get a hard copy because I want it. And I feel like this is a book that I'm gonna reread like quite a lot. So book number 1 was a total success. So the next book that I am really keen on reading is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. Now we are 2 or 3 days away from the release date, but I am very impatient, and I went to my bookstore because I read online that they have it. Oh, and you can really see with my lights here how shiny the cover is. So, Study in Drowning, I'm super excited. The premise says, Effie has always believed in fairy tales. She's had no choice. Since childhood, she's been haunted by visions of the fairy king and found solace only in pages of, I can't pronounce this book, or the author's name of it, a beloved epic about a mortal girl who falls in love with the fairy king and then destroys him. Effie's tattered copy is all that's keeping her afloat through the stifling first term. Basically kind of wins a contest, I guess, to redesign her favorite author, the author of this epic poem's house. But when she arrives, it is a musty, decrepit estate on the brink of crumbling into a hungry sea. There is a guy named Preston, a stodgy young literature student who is determined to prove her favorite author is a fraud. It is so good. I'm like 70 pages in. Basically 70 pages in. It starts off very quick. Like the first chapter or two, they're short, but I did feel like they were kind of just there to provide you the necessary information before the story could really get started. They were still good, really engaging, but I could tell that they were doing a job, because I've just hit the part where she is finally about to arrive at Hireth, Prereth. Before my next check-in, I'm going to do a big Google and find out how to pronounce at least a few of the names in this book. It is set in a Welsh-inspired world, hence my pronunciation challenges, and I'm loving that. I don't think I've really read a secondary fantasy world that's inspired by Wales and like that region, that language, that culture. But the plot so far, she's gotten the contest, she's gotten on the train, she's on her way. She is an architecture student. And she's only an architecture student because she wanted to be a literature student, but you can't be a lit student if you are a woman. And I'm still kind of getting a sense of some of the world building here. The world has like sort of a mythologized these writers, including this great, I want to call him Mirrodin, but I feel like that is a gross mispronunciation and those letters make different sounds. So we're gonna call him Mirrodin. No, we're not gonna call him that. We're gonna, the author that she loves, he has recently died, and so he is now one of the sleepers. He's one of these authors that's like, there's something mystical about them, and I don't completely understand what that is. And there's also something that they've referred to loosely called drowning, which I think is a climate thing, but I'm not really sure, again, like what causes that or what the significance of the drowning, this big flood, seems to be, and if it is indeed the big flood that I am thinking that it is. So she's just arrived, and another thing that we discover about Effie very early on is that she's not super reliable. She seems to be seeing things. She has a number of medications she takes, including sleeping pills, and these little pink pills, we don't know what is yet. And I love like the description. You can feel the anticipation, and this is one of my favorite things in probably any book ever, is like that anticipation when you're arriving at the house and you like feel the atmosphere collecting around you in the description. And so she's in this car with this guy's lawyer or something that of course comes to the train station to pick her up. They're on their way and the sea has risen so much that it's already overtaken half of the road, so they have to like drive through it. And she's going up this thing wondering like, is this a mistake? These imposing great cliffs, and the way that Ava Reid begins to describe everything is so romantic and lush, and every word is just doing something beautiful. It's there for a reason, I guess. I'm also so happy that it was this cover. Both of the covers are beautiful. I'll put the other one up here. I really love this like more illustrated gold cover. Rouge was excellent. I am about 70 pages into studying drowning and loving it so far. Hello, good morning. So I am now about 60% of the way through the book. Chapter 12. We've met Preston, her rival, and there's definitely a little bit of tension there. I should have mentioned in my first check-in, she, in the very beginning of the book, tries to take out some books about the author that she's interested in from the library, and the books have all been withdrawn by one person, and so she's quite pissed off about that. And it turns out that Preston is the one who did that. So she goes in there, there's a tension immediately off the bat. And then she also discovers that he is part, what's the word for this? From another land. Because the world or the country that this is set in is in constant conflict with another country. And he's partly from that other country. And so there's just a lot of different things that end up causing a lot of tension between them. And I think I'm kind of coming to the point where I can't talk about the plot anymore, or else it's gonna just be big spoiler territory. But I did want to talk a little bit about the world building, because I feel like the world is starting to be fleshed out a little bit more, especially with this drowning, which is still a little bit mysterious. Seems like it was like a climate event that happened like 100 years ago, and it really caused a big divide between the north and the south of this country, where the south is much more superstitious. This is where the drowning primarily occurred and like killed a lot of people, and so they tend to believe a lot in like fairies, omens, and like many more superstitions. And then the north is much less so. So there's a lot of different elements like that going on right now, and I am really loving it. I love the contrast between the North and the South and this sort of political element that is an undercurrent throughout the book. In kind of a similar way, I suppose, to her first book, her debut, The Wolf and the Woodsman, I think it is. But I really feel like she knows also how to do a Gothic really well. And there are so many Gothic elements in this book, which I am completely enjoying. The house is totally delivering. So when she first arrives, she doesn't see the house immediately. She draws out that suspense and that moment of like, when are we gonna see it? And there's so many unusual rooms that seem almost magic, and like crumbling balconies with, you know, incredible like take your breath away views and lots of like eerie things. But there's a lot of really creepy stuff, and I feel like she's just doing such a great job pulling on some of those Gothic elements and making them her own so far. I definitely feel like I'm a lot more attached to the characters at this point in the book too, a lot more invested. The first two chapters, I feel like they were not her strongest, but once she really gets going, and I'm having such a good time. I mean, I'm just chewing through this. I stayed up way too late reading. So I think I'm gonna finish it today. I have about 150 pages left, and I'm gonna read it to and from work today. So probably you're gonna see a much more wilted and exhausted Stephanie checking in, having finished the book, with my final thoughts. So I finished A Study in Drowning, and I loved it. I really loved it. This is totally a book for book lovers, for story lovers. It is really, really centered around this tale, and the main character's love for writing and reading, and vibes are just incredible. By the end of this book, I was sitting on transit, like, reading it with, like, white knuckled reading. It was so satisfying, and so, like, when everything comes together, I have to use both hands to demonstrate, when everything comes together, and it's just so dramatic, and everything ties in, and everything starts to make sense and unfold in this epic moment. Whew. It was so good. There's also an element of tenderness to the romance, which I really loved, and I don't usually root for these like very tender sort of romances, but I think that it was so perfect in this book, and it was just so lovely and really different. Actually, this book is really different from her other two in a lot of ways. Like, there's a lot of the same themes, similar traumas, but the execution and the way that those things are explored are completely different. I also did not really realize that this book was YA. Apparently, she was locked into a contract with her first two books that prevented her from writing another adult book. And so this ended up being a YA, despite it being about university students. So I would definitely say that it is like an upper YA book. It doesn't feel like a young book at all. I know that Ava Reid is kind of criticized for her depiction of trauma and like sexuality and violence of multiple kinds. And some people really do not like Juniper and Thorn because a lot of that is on page and like very visceral. But I would say that this is a really great book for people who maybe didn't like Juniper and Thorn, but they really liked her prose or her story ideas, like conceptually. I think this could be a really great book for them because there are still some like very heavy topics. She mentions the trigger warnings on her website, but none of it's really on page. It's a lot less graphic than her other two novels. But personally, I think that Ava Reid is becoming a favorite author of mine just because I really like how she handles very dark and difficult topics like trauma. And I don't think that the way that she handles a lot of these topics is damaging. I think she handles it so well. This is such a fast read. I ate it up. I think I read it within 24 hours. The plot kind of starts pretty much immediately from page 1, and then you just go until the last section. And it's a really tightly written book. Like, I never find with her books that there's not a lot of filler or fluff. She's very to the point. She knows what she's trying to achieve, and she does it really well. And some of that, I think, is how she writes super thematically. Like, obviously the topic or the theme in this is drowning, water. There are also these really beautiful epigraphs that are at the beginning of every chapter, and a lot of them are poetry or like little excerpts from scholarly publications from this world. And there's this sort of bit of poetry that's kind of repeated throughout, that the only enemy is the sea. The way that she creates this environment, and the idea of drowning is both simile and literal threat, and the way in her like word choice and on a prose level is just so, it creates such a visceral and emotional experience for the reader. I wish that this book was just a little bit longer, not because it isn't satisfying. I found it very satisfying actually, and the ending was happy and like pretty well tied up. I just wanted to be in it longer. I was not, when I finally got to the end, I just felt like I wasn't ready to leave, and I'm a little bit heartbroken because I just don't know what else to replace this with. So I mean, I guess if you know any other books that are like crumbling house gothic vibes on the edge of an ocean that is like a totally hostile environment with roaring winds and like a romance, this is just tell me what it is. I'm so sad that this is over. I'll be rereading it again for sure. So I would say this vlog was a total success. I definitely feel like it is fall. The pumpkin scented candle that I got today is also really helping. Study in Drowning was super gothic, so many atmospheric vibes and such a visceral feeling. Then Rouge was just unhinged. I'm still like kind of processing it a little bit. Super witchy, super bizarre, here for it. 2 amazing books, 1 awesome reading week, not even a week, like weekend. So I just had such a great time making this vlog. I hope you enjoyed it. If you made it to this part in the video, thank you so much for watching. And please let me know if you have book recommendations for me, especially ones that are like gothic, seaside, melodrama, big feelings. Hit me up. But also, if you have any others that you think I might like, especially like Rouge-esque type of books that is just mind-boggling, emotional, twisted, dark fairy tale, I will eat it up. Tell me about them. And let me know if you're planning to read either of these books this spooky season. The vlog started off supposedly cozy, and now apparently it is spooky. So I would say that my hypothesis was moderately accurate. Moderately confirmed. Until next time, have a great reading week, and thanks for watching. Bye.